play along. Some folks have expressed that they want to watch but not be in the room. You let us know when we're up, honey.
There is a button on my screen that says start webinar, and I didn't want to push it.
Just don't touch that. Just it's gonna be there the whole time.
Okay.
Because you're now a host. Dimitri is got the magic, and at some point it will say that we are streaming. We are streaming. Hi, everyone. I'm really just so glad that you are here today. This is a big thing for us to think through together, and it just feels good having y'all in the room. So thank you. Thank you. Let's just start by bringing ourselves into the room. I know some of you are literally out of the room, like out on the road, but let's bring ourselves together here. I'm Hilda Gottlieb with Creating the Future, and it's wonderful to have you all here. And if each of you could say who you are, where you are, the acknowledgement of the people whose lands you are on, if you know that, and something that's just been meaningful in your life. And I usually save myself for last, but it has been such a few days that I'm going to go first. And I never do that. Those of you who've been around know I never do that, but life has just been too fun. I'm Hilda Gottlieb, and I am in the traditional unceded lands of the Tohono O'odham and the Pascua Yaqui here in what is colonially known as Tucson, Arizona. This was traditionally a time of preparing for the winter. And as we've been talking about here with climate change, which is, as most of us know, affecting people who are more marginalized than anybody and have been stuck in places where climate is hitting the worst. We right now here in the desert are close to hitting 100 degrees Fahrenheit, about 39, 40 Celsius at the end of October. So welcome to life in the desert. What has been meaningful for our lives is that this past weekend, we did a very quick turnaround to LA because we got to see Joni Mitchell for one of her performances, which is just been absolutely so. Joni Mitchell has been the soundtrack of my life since I was 15 years old. I had never gotten to see her. It was absolutely perfect. She was at the Hollywood Bowl, and we literally drove in, went to the concert, spent some time with our kids, and turned around and drove back. But it was really pretty wonderful and deeply meaningful. It was delightful to be able to have Dimitri and my daughter's best friend and her parents. And what's neat about that in a million ways is that much as Joni was the soundtrack of my life, that means that she was the soundtrack of my kids' life also. And so it's just pretty delightful for all of us to be together. So that's what's been going on in our lives. And literally we jammed in, jammed out, and then we're like, because the other big meaningful thing is that we are kicking off a podcast. We are starting a Creating the Future podcast, which will launch, fingers crossed, next week. So literally we jammed to the concert, jammed back, and immediately we were actually working in the car. So it's a good thing that one of us drives and one of us doesn't. But yeah, that's what's been going on here. John, how about you? Where are you located and what's going on in your life?
Good afternoon, John Epps. I'm in Highland, California, which is the land of the Yamava Indians. I have been here for 30 years, originally from Philadelphia. I was trying to think of one good thing that has happened, and I think probably for me, I'm planning a chess date with my grandson after this meeting. So I'm really looking forward to that. I know he's looking forward to that. So we're gonna go hang out and play some chess. So he wants to become a better chess player, and I love playing chess. So it's gonna be a great opportunity for some bonding and spending some time together. So I'm excited about that.
That is wonderful. And by way of introduction, John is on the board of directors, or as we loosely might call it, of Creating the Future. Legally, it is our board, but John is part of the integrity team that that leads and helps to figure stuff out around here. And it, your spirit just the minute you joined us, as a volunteer, we were literally all, can we keep him? Can we, it was like, like the puppy in the window. Can we keep him? Can we keep him? Because your spirit is just so beautiful and we just love having you. So I'm really grateful you're here today. Next up, Madeline DeMarco, whose spirit also is absolutely, Madeline has been part of a variety of our teams for, I don't know, it's got to be like 3 years now, maybe. And I always look forward to having you in the room. So if you want to say hello and introduce yourself.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you, Hildy. Time flies when you're having fun, and this is a fun group of people I'm blessed to be able to play with. So, hi everybody. My name is Madeline DeMarco. I use the pronoun she and her. I am joining you all from Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is the historical lands of the Anishinaabe people, but have also been stewarded by the Seneca, Delaware, Shawnee, and Wyandot nations as well. Something meaningful going on in my life. I just ran the Detroit Half Marathon on Sunday, and it's a cool race because it's actually international. You get to go over the bridge into Canada for a little bit and then back under the tunnel back into the United States. So it's got to be one of the few like international or cross-country races that exist out there, which is pretty cool. So I'm a little bit sore than I thought I would be after that. So I've been kind of hobbling around, but I think we're turning a corner. So sore in a good way. So I'm excited to be with you all here today.
How many marathons have you run?
Well, I've done 2 full marathons and many more half marathons than that. I am kind of a runner for folks on this call that I haven't had the joy of meeting before. My pandemic project was that I ran every single street in Ann Arbor. So yeah, it was a lot.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. Next up, Jackie Arnberg. Jackie has been part of.
I'm actually going to ask you to skip me for just a second. And then
Okie dokie. Then I will.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. You jump in when you're ready. Sakshi Jain. Sakshi has joined us very, very recently. I put a note out. We put a note out in our newsletter maybe several weeks ago, looking for someone to help with the work that we're doing right here. And Sakshi immediately raised her hand, and what a delight to meet you and to spend time with you. And your story is just so interesting. And in the time that Sakshi is waiting for her work permit to be able to be here in the US, she wanted to do volunteering and has been volunteering throughout her community and is now helping us, which I think is just incredible. So if you want to just introduce yourself and just say a little bit about what's been meaningful in your life. And I'd ask where you are, but you're probably in transit from and to.
Yeah, so I am transiting right now from Florida to Georgia, but I have been living in Atlanta for the last 6 months, and I had to look this up, but Atlanta has originally belonged to the Creek people. So those are the lands we inhabit today. Something meaningful and super excited to be here. I love the stories that everybody else has. John, all the best for the chess game with your grandson, and Madeline, really cool to see, that you ran all the streets in Ann Arbor. That's so cool. Something meaningful that happened with me a couple of weeks ago. So my nephew turned 1, and he's, he's the joy of my life. And I attempted to write a little book that captured his first year So I wrote a little poem and added, snippets from like little illustrations that I found online. So I just created a little storybook for him to memorialize his first year. So that was something fun that I did that I wasn't sure I would be able to. It was a creative project, but also a labor of love.
Oh, how awesome. What a wonderful, wonderful thing. What a wonderful thing. And I think Jackie is now with us. Yes. Yep. Not with us. She will be back. She will be back. I'm gonna just wait 1 second to see if she steps in. There she comes. I knew that. And Debbie's here too. Oh, wonderful. And Dimitri, if you want to do your magic. Yep. Both Debbie and Jackie, Dimitri is making you co-hosts because Zoom has changed things, and now our solution, we'll just put it that way, our solution is to make you all co-hosts, and we'll go from there. Yay, Jackie is back with us. I'm so glad you are here. Jackie is has done has been a specialist in grants for a very long time, but I got to know Jackie because she is one of the people who helps to facilitate the group that we have on Facebook for consultants. And it's not just consultants who are using catalytic thinking, but it's consultants who work in the nonprofit arena, which is just such a specialized place to be. And Jackie has the best sense of humor. And you come up with gifts. I don't know how you find the gifts that you find, but it is just every week Jackie runs what we call the brag basket. Is we refrain from because consultants could always just talk about how great they are and do all this marketing all the time. We refrain in that group from bragging, except one post a week, and Jackie is in charge of that post. And every week you come up, I check out that post just to see what you came up with, and just amazing stuff. So I'm really glad you're here. If you will introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about what is meaningful in your life these days.
Absolutely. So I'm Jackie Ehrenberg. I have been in the fundraising world for over 22 years. I used to fangirl about Hildy when I was in college at Arizona State, getting my degree in nonprofit management, and then reading the fundraising book way back when. And so to be able to work alongside her is quite an honor. And one of the great things that's happening right now, so I've owned my own business for 6 years as a grant consultant, and have expanded to a couple different states actually, but I have just within the last 2 months brought someone on alongside me to help me grow my business. And that is a huge step, and she is just a go-getter, and really she does things that are perfect, and I don't even think they need to be done. I didn't even think about it ahead of time, and she just does it. I'm like, oh yeah, thank you very much for getting that done. Okay, good. And one thing checked off, and she's like, I don't feel like I'm doing very much. I'm like, you're doing exactly what you need. And I just said that to her today. So it's a really great to have that, because when you're a consultant, you can feel very lonely owning your own business. And so the Facebook group is honestly where I don't feel lonely, because I have such a community of folks. But to have somebody alongside me every day now is going to be great.
That is wonderful. And John, you're doing consulting. We need to bring you into that group.
I'd be happy to join.
We will make sure that happens. Lastly, but not leastly, I want to introduce my friend Debbie Rich, who I am so glad that you're here. Debbie and I have known each other for years. I can't count that high. Debbie has been in a comadre here in Tucson for decades. She has run some of the biggest organizations here in town, and she is the best fundraiser I have ever met. And when I need advice, I go to Debbie. Her most recent big gig was as the CEO of the Girl Scouts, where she raised millions of dollars in a capital campaign. And But mostly Debbie is got a, let's see how to put it. If anybody is going to be the troublemaker to get our kids in trouble, just on the line of what might be trouble, Debbie's got a mischievous streak in her that I adore. So it is really, really wonderful to have you with us. If you want to just say hello and just share something that is meaningful in your life right now.
Well, just retired from many, many years of high stress jobs. So I'm very happy to be retired. And I think that's what's meaningful in my life, is to get that recharge of doing what you want when you want and not being so responsible for thousands of little minions. So that is meaningful now. I am a big fan of Hildy's work. It has helped guide me make decisions over the years, and I've used those tactics with all of my staff and my boards, and so I'm very much committed to the work and am interested and curious to see where the fundraising can go.
Yay. Well, it's wonderful to have you all here, and I'm hoping Sandy can join us, but we will push on and get started. If any of you are watching via the website and would like to participate, please go to Twitter. We're going to get away from Twitter as quickly as we can, and get another platform, because it's not where we want to be. But if you do want to participate right now, go to Twitter and use the hashtag creating the future, and we'll be watching for that. Most people have indicated that they want to watch, but they're not so sure they want to be part of the actual doing. But if you're there and you want to tell us who you are and introduce yourself, we would love to know that you're there. And Dimitri will be watching for the Twitter stream. I am deeply grateful to all of you, I have to say. I want to start out by just giving you all a little bit of background. Let's get on the same page, and move forward together. We'll be using catalytic thinking today to think through the pieces that need to be in place before we can start applying for grants. And I guess I should probably start by going back and just talking a little bit about creating the future and where we've been, so that we're all in the same sort of place. When we formed Creating the Future, and after the first couple of years, we all decided that we would not see this as an ongoing program that was going to be around forever and ever and ever and ever. We wanted to have a 10-year mission. What that did is it let us see this as a project with a definitive what we want to accomplish by the end of it, rather than seeing this as, well, we'll just keep going and going and going and see what happens. And there's something really powerful in seeing something as a short-term project. And 10 years is short. Seeing it as a project, we all know we're better when we have a deadline. And so looking at it through that lens, the first half of that 10 years, we were mostly, almost entirely doing demonstration projects and teaching. And the teaching really is part of the demonstrating, because our students would go out, like Debbie just said, she would take it and take it into her staff and be able to respond and say, okay, this is what we're learning from that. And so most of what we were doing in that first half was demonstrating the power of catalytic thinking to create change. And so I wanted to just share a slide, if I can find it. There it is. Click on here and see if I can increase the size of this. Probably not, because again, they moved everything. There we
The
go.
bottom right corner, Hildy.
There we go. Yeah, now I'm just in Adobe. I can actually do that. Thanks, John. Catalytic thinking, I know that you all are slightly to very familiar with catalytic thinking, but catalytic thinking really focuses on the fact that rather than just changing the actions that we do without changing the thinking that goes into that action, we need to be changing the thinking Because if we change the actions that we take without changing our thoughts about those actions, we're just going to keep getting the same results. And so what catalytic thinking does is it focuses on the questions that our thoughts are answering. We don't even realize that our thoughts are all answers to questions. And so when we do that, it creates a mindset shift. And as you can see in those bullet points, it moves us from incrementally reacting to creating what's possible. It moves us from thinking that we are the be all and end all and competing with everybody else to building trust, building relationship, and building cooperation. And especially for instead of going it alone, we're really looking at what does it take to build and share each other's strengths. And the questions, the sets of questions that we'll ask are very, very first and foremost about the people who will be affected by whatever we're considering. And then from there, we reach for what is possible and create the conditions that will lead to that. And that is what we were demonstrating, is the power of what does it look like? What is possible when we actually aim at what's possible, which I know has been a powerful question for so many of you in the work that you're doing of what could this make possible? If we do this thing, what could be possible? One of the things that we did not do a lot of during that time is document what we were learning. So we did a lot of demonstrating, which is so common in the nonprofit sphere. We're real good at doing the do and don't have the time, don't have the staff, don't have the funding, whatever it is, to actually be documenting as we go along. But the whole purpose of what we were doing is to document and share the power of this framework. Our mission is that those questions that bring out the best in what is possible are ubiquitous. That's our goal. At the end of that 10 years, we want this to, it may not be everybody, but enough that nobody's going to say, I've never heard that question before. That's interesting. What we want is, yeah, I've heard that we encountered that question all the time. So during the second half of our mission, that's what we're going to be doing, is documenting and sharing, creating a library of resources on catalytic thinking. The theory, what is this thing? The case studies, what does this look like in practice? What does this look like in fundraising? What does this look like in boards? What does this look like in different scenarios? And to some degree, the pedagogy, not necessarily this is how you teach this, but this is what we learned about teaching this. This is what we've experienced works well in teaching this so that others can take this and move it out. And that's really what our goal is. And I shared with you all a link that you may or may not have been able to get to before our meeting today. But really what we're looking at the end of this 10 years is to say, here is a library of all of these resources. You go out and teach this. You go out and take this. Jackie, you take this into your fundraising work. Madeline, you take this into your work at the university. John, you take this into the classes that you're teaching so that you don't need, if people need to come to creating the future to learn these questions, this will never be ubiquitous. It'll never be everywhere. It needs to be, you need to have the resources and then take them and use them. And so that's really where we're headed, is creating a massive library with all those resources, hiring a couple people to publicize and engage folks with the material so that whether it's an article in Forbes or something in an academic journal or taking it out to talk to university professors, that's really what we're looking at for the next several years as we get ready to leave that basically as our legacy. Our first step is to create what we're thinking about as resource documents. Look at all of the demonstration projects that we've done, which is somewhere between 20 and 30. It's not only demonstration projects we've done with others, but also looking at ourselves as a demonstration project. Many of you have been around our meetings enough to know that we're experimenting with everything we do. Whether it is how to engage the community, whether it is what does it mean to be a board, whether it is whatever it is, we've applied catalytic thinking to our own stuff. And so there's maybe 20 to 30 different projects that we want to just have we're talking about them as resource documents so that if somebody wants, if we hire a writer, let's say, to say, we want mainstream media like Forbes, let's say, or Fast Company, to do an article or write an article for Fast Company, they've got the resources right there. Okay, from that, all the information, the who, what, where, when, from all of that, I can write an article for Forbes. Or from that, I can start looking at an academic research article about this particular topic. But at least the stuff is there. The main interview will have been there, the main documenting of it. When we took a look at, bring this up on, there we go. When we looked at what it would cost to do that, where is there it is. We spoke with folks who do write for a living, and the ballpark that we heard is $1 a word for writers is about average. And so what we looked at is if there's 5,000 words in a document, 20 resource documents at $1 a word, we ballparked what a publicist would cost to start sharing some of this information with mainstream media. And we will find out when we actually go out to bid with that. The content experts is the time of the people who need to be interviewed to share what happened during those projects. Whether that, again, is internally or externally, there's going to be considerable time, especially on the part of folks internally at Creating the Future, which could be hours and hours and hours of being interviewed about this project and this project and this project. And then there's the project administration. And so we're looking at about $250,000 on that. Does that make sense to you all? Does that sound about right? It's pretty. I'm sorry, go ahead. Cannot hear whoever that was.
Sorry, it's me. Can you hear me?
Yes,
There you
yes.
go. Yeah.
I said, I just think the publicist is high.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, we will find out. We will definitely find out. And like I said, it was getting online and looking at ballpark. So if it's high, that would be awesome. I tend to budget very conservatively.
Something that might be important for the budget, and I don't know if you already have it documented, is a document or the ability to evaluate the work that you do so that you can report on the evaluation portion of it. That's separate than a writer. That's more of an evaluator putting into frameworks.
Yeah.
And that'll add to the budget.
Absolutely. And it may not be in this phase, which will document just create the resources, but someone, especially if we're going to be doing, getting academic researchers, it may be in that phase, but in one of the other. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I had not thought about that.
People forget to put that in nonprofit budgets, period. So
all the time. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for that. And we can talk about what to budget for that as we're thinking through. Yeah, Sakshi.
So I'm not sure if this is part of budget, but anything around marketing, design, all that costs some money as well. Distribution on social media or on the website, and all of these costs are within the project management or publicist budget already.
Right. Yeah. And I think pulling that together rather than saying publicist, maybe we need to just be talking about sort of the PR aspect, the I hate to use the expression getting the word out, but the getting the word out aspect.
And
especially since that is like one of the end goals of the project.
Yeah.
Sorry, please.
To Sasi's point, is creating this interactive library virtually phase 3? Is phase 2 just collecting the resources, and then phase 3 is launching it onto
Yeah,
the web?
the bigger project is to really create the library.
Okay.
And that will be everything from there needs to be a website for it. There needs to be a place for it, to turning these resource documents into usable fashion that so it may be in one case it may be a class. In one case, it may be a case study document. In one case, it may be an article or a short blog post on 3 things you can do to X. And so the development of the library itself, this is, you're right, a first phase in that, to just document everything that we've done, and to get it in a format that if somebody wants to write, whether it's a blog post or an article for whatever, the facts are there, the material is there. Because right now, where most of the material is in the heads of those of us who are doing it. You know, Madeline's got some of it, and John's got some of it, and Hildy's got a lot of it. And if something happens, you know, if something happens to this brain right here, this all goes away. It's, thank goodness, all of our meetings have been recorded. Since the dawn of time, all of our meetings have been recorded, so the conversations are there. But yeah, that's really what this phase is.
I think that for your fundraising, it would be good to map it out that way to show your different phases. So then as you're building your case, you know, phase 1 is paid for, all that demonstration, you know, put a dollar amount on that. And then you're in this phase 2. And then from there, you'll go to phase 3 for whatever. But just like give a strong dollar amount to phase 1, even if it's all in kind, that's okay.
Oh, that's huge. That means like you're over 50% to your goal.
Really smart, really smart, really. We haven't even gotten into the stuff yet, and you guys are already saying, I'm so, okay.
Oh, I thought we were supposed to have a fundraising.
No. We are. I'm like I said, I haven't even started asking the catalytic thinking questions yet, and my brain is already going, yay. So yes, keep it coming. John, what's up? You're muted.
I think the other piece, and I'm not sure if it's in this phase, but I think it's definitely going to impact this phase. As I'm looking at technology right now, people are taking their materials. Like one author was talking about the fact that he took all of the books that he has written and now basically has fed them into his artificial intelligence. And now you pretty much just talk to the AI like you're talking to him and you get the answers. That's time, energy, effort, investment, understanding. So I'm not sure, but I'm sure we're going to be in that world by the time what we're talking about. So when I look at kind of our budget, it's more personnel heavy, but I also think we need to keep the technology side because I really think we're going to be plugging in at the time when it's going to be the expectation that I can do that.
Yeah. One of the thoughts that I was having is almost doing like A/B testing, to do half of it using AI to go through all of our meetings and go through all of that, and the other half doing it with humans and just see what the difference is. To me that sounded really interesting.
Well, I think it has to be a blend of both. I think that's really what it has to be.
I think so too. And it does make it so much easier. You know, one of the things that we're both loving and putting toes into and realizing where it's not there yet on the podcast is that the platform that we're using auto generates via AI a transcript. And it's pretty accurate. It's pretty accurate. But it also goes through and notes and deletes things like the ums and the, one of my speech patterns that I realize I do just by listening to myself is that I have a tendency to repeat a word at the beginning of a sentence. It could be 3 times. So I'll say that so it's pulling those out, but then it's also pulling out other words. So it's not smart enough yet. It's just still requiring a person to go in, but it's saving us so much time by having that. And it's all just generated literally the minute the video is rendered, the AI has already done the transcript, which is remarkable, just remarkable. So yeah. 2 more just bits of information that I want to share. And I do have to say that my brain has literally exploded of thinking of phase 1 as what we've done in the first half and putting the budget to that. Like if we were talking like, okay, this whole meeting was about Hildy being happy. Hildy's happy. So and this is not what the meeting was about, but I just have to say, I'm just, I love the perspective. 2 things I want to share with you guys. One, we incorporated in 2011, got our C3 in 2013, and set the 10-year clock at the beginning of 2017, I think. So we have been around technically 2011, 13, 14 years. We have never, ever applied for grants. Lots of reasons for that. 2 big ones. One, we fundamentally do not, it sort of goes counter to our values to step into that power dynamic of filling out the forms with lots of rules and lots of, yeah. Don't need to go there. But the second one was very, very practical reason. When we first started as a demonstration of what is possible with these questions, we were a startup, which is difficult to fund, and B, we were an idea. So we weren't a startup that was feeding people or housing people or providing a direct service. We were a startup and we were an idea. And we knew that we would be spending a ton of time on $5,000 grants. And it was a very calculated decision that we're just going to do the work and see what we can do. What that means is a couple of things. And they're both very relevant to what we're talking about today. One is that's the reason nothing's in place. We don't have a case for support. We don't have a description of the project. We have none of the things that you would put into place for doing grants, which is why we're talking today. The second thing is that our budget to date has been minuscule. It has been this organization has been entirely volunteer driven. And when there have been wages, so when our faculty has been teaching, it's been stipend wages for really hugely committed practitioners who have wanted to be part of this. Our highest budget to date has been under $100,000. And that's our highest. Our last few years have been minuscule, 30,000, 40,000. Both Dimitri and I working for stipend wages. And that's okay. Because again, that was the trade-off of, do we want to spend all the time doing fundraising while we could be out doing the work? And that's just been where we've been. But what that says is, building the whole library, building out what we're now talking about as phase 3, could be $1 million, could be $1.5 million. We've got to have video producers. We've got to have website producers. We've got to have all of that. We don't have a track record of a cash budget of $1 million, $1.5 million. We don't have a track record in this case of $250,000 for what we're talking about with the budget that I just showed you all, with the stuff that it does or doesn't include. So just keeping that in mind, I love the fact, Debbie, that you're talking about documenting the value of the cash value of that first phase, I never think in those terms. So thank you for that. Because there is, it's when we teach the sharing of collective enoughness, we need to have a budget that shows here's what was shared and here's what the cash amount is. Food banks do that all the time. They say, we're a $12 million organization and only $1 million of it is cash. And so I'm appreciating that. So thank you. So that's where we be. And so if we can start from here, just going through the questions of catalytic thinking. And one of the things that we're trying to figure out, and Sakshi has been so generous in volunteering to help us identify potential funders. And to any of you who are on this call, if anybody occurs to you as we're thinking here, let's just start keeping a list as we're going. The first question in catalytic thinking is who's going to be affected by whatever we're going to be doing, which is documenting all of this stuff. And so obviously the people that are immediately coming to mind are the foundations that we would be applying to. But what kind of foundations? What would their focus be? What, and who else will be affected by our having this library? And it just occurred to me that I would like to, even though we are recording this, I never trusted. I went my own. Who occurs to you that would benefit from what we're doing, that would be effective?
For your question. So when you say the foundations would benefit from the documentation of the work?
Not necessarily benefit. I'll take that word back. But who would be affected by our having this library? And the only reason that I said the foundations is because they're going to be funding it, so they will be touched by this.
And I also think like the constituents that will access the resources, and that's such a broad scope of folks. I think, my vantage point is always the nonprofit community, but I think the higher education, I think it can apply across all communities of change.
I like that the phrasing.
The community of change. I like that part.
Yeah.
Because it does fit all of us, and even the consultants,
Oh, I think consultants big time. I mean, consultants are already using our stuff.
I must have picked up some of those questions of yours someplace because I'm not trained in catalytic thinking, but that's exactly what I say to a new client. I ask these types of questions with a new client just to build their case for support, honestly. So,
Yeah.
To have some formal training in it might be nice.
Yeah. Who else?
There's the students and the teachers, that kind of constituency Debbie and Jackie were mentioning, but then also the people that those folks will go back and use that information with, so their organizations, families, friends, foundations.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like this Venn diagram of how everything morphs together, because what Madeline said, it does change the family system as well. So I think that, like, what are the systems that this will impact?
Yep. Yeah, I frequently picture it as sort of ripples in a pond, that if you throw the stone in, who's touched immediately by it, and then who's touched by that, and then who's touched by that. I do like the phrasing of what are the systems that this will impact. And so what are some of those systems? We talked about university systems,
I
nonprofit.
think it's community systems. Like I think of in Tucson, we have, I mean, I don't know if we have it anymore, but you know, we had this pro neighborhoods, you know, initiative where it looked at all the systems in a neighborhood and then looked at the need. If we pro neighborhoods might still be here if we had approached it from this way of thinking. So I think that making that case of how do you look at each, like what's the core of each community system?
Oh, yeah.
Or
Yeah.
even bigger than that, I was thinking the organizations that are pseudo government that affect the changes inside the local governments. For Maricopa Association of Governments, you know, then impacts lots of Maricopa cities in the county of Maricopa. And in that same regard, the community development organizations.
Yeah.
And so I think too, like having worked for a moment in healthcare, you know, when you look at healthcare expansion and how all these hospitals are popping up all over the county, and you think of, you know, what's thinking did they look to implement that growth, and is the framework of it what we would do as well, or it was theirs just revenue driven, you know, like there's this many people and they go to the hospital this many times, you know, I don't know, but I think what I'd want to do is see how we could overlay this structure onto those systems that are in the growth mode.
Yeah.
The community needs assessment that they do, some of the hospitals do community needs assessments to see
Yeah.
what's needs to be
Yeah.
changed in their communities.
And I think like if you look at it through entrepreneurial growth and small businesses, and you know, think of that if you had an idea and said, I want to start this business, and you were trained or you had this framework of catalytic thinking, that would jumpstart your business, the trajectory so much quicker.
And every community college has got a small business development center. Oh, yeah.
Or JTED, I mean, here, you know, the tech, because that, if you look at the research, kids, young adults are really looking at being in the trades, you know, rather than an academic
college.
education. So like, how can this structure impact that way of thinking from the individual level to that kid who's trying to decide what they're going to do, to where they're going to learn to do it, and then how they're going to advance it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking a lot about like different identities of people. Like we have like Creating the Future is International. There's people from all over the world here. There are people that have differing levels of education. Some people are teachers of this, some people are students of this. A lot of us are both of it. Some people are really used to creating the future and have been accessing the content and have paid to access the content already, that are going to have to kind of come to terms with the new system. Some people are brand new and will hopefully be reaching for the very first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I jokingly tell new clients when I'm writing their case for support, you know, to describe the populations that are impacted by your work, and don't use the word everybody, because I need specificity. But guess what? Catalytic thinking, that packs everybody.
So we're screwed.
Yep.
You all have me starting to think about university programs, because this has been taught in various university programs.
Wow.
And it's across the board. So I'm wondering so nonprofit management, it has been taught in nonprofit management classes. It's been taught in public administration classes, which are different than nonprofit management. Sometimes nonprofit management fits under public administration. Then there are there's a group in Sweden that is looking to incorporate catalytic thinking into, they have a master's degree program in, it's something like environmental risk management, basically the risk management around climate change. And so I'm really just thinking about, there are so many different places. When we say university, there's so many different places within a university system. And then, of course, there's Madeline, who's working within the student support at a university, who's using it for that. But just in terms of teaching, it's occurring to me that there's a million different places with it. You can't just say university is sort of like Jackie saying everybody.
On the level of resources which is true with anything, right? There are small community colleges, like you mentioned, Hildy. There are private schools with big donors. There are large four-year public institutions. There are schools in Sweden, that have completely different models of funding and teaching than in the United States. So
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
To be effective in this phase, do we need to identify like the key target? And because we could spend forever on the ripples, but do we need to say, okay, to collect with this group as the intention, would that help advance the work?
It's the next question I was going to ask.
I learned my order of questions from you.
Well, and thing that's always fascinating to me is marketing people will tell you you need to have a narrow target focus. And what we just described here is all of the people who are going to be affected, whether we focus on them or not. And so often by narrowing too soon, we have unintended consequences. We've got all the stuff that happens when we don't include the people that need to be included. Of all the people that we listed of who will be affected, one of the questions that I have in terms of, yes, the foundations who fund us would be affected. I'm curious if you all have thoughts as we've been talking about who else would be affected. What kinds of foundations, just like we said, what kinds of universities or university programs, what kinds of foundations?
From the top of my head, it would say social change, where they're trying to make like system change, not feed people. Foundations. And they're definitely different out there. They're not easy to get into, but yes, they're there.
Yeah. And
I would be curious to have a sit down with foundations that do feed people and look at what they're doing and how they're doing it, and help them to look through this lens to see if their work might, and it might not, as we all know, the answer could be no, might be more impactful. So I would be in looking at case statements, Jacqueline, it's like I would want one for that social change, but I'd also want one for nuts and bolts. Because if we can layer it into nuts and bolts as a shift in fundamental thinking, I think it would have greater value to the limited number of foundations that are out there.
wow.
Makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you've got me thinking now about regardless of whether they're focused on systems change or they're focused on direct service, there's sort of a subgroup of all of those that are providing capacity building to their grantees. And so that could be, a number 3 could be the foundations who are just providing capacity building or really focused there. But if they're supporting food banks or supporting homeless folks, they could be supporting them with capacity building where, as you said, Debbie, that could fit in there.
Yeah, and that's a really good way to look at it, because big federal grants all have that capacity building development line item. And I just, over the years having those grants, it's a struggle to figure out what to do with those. So that might be an interesting place to, like with the AmeriCorps or Corporation for National Service funding.
Yeah. So in all of these, who are the most exciting to you all to focus on as we start thinking about what this can make possible?
Are you talking in terms of which type of funder?
Well, just of all the people we listed foundations, different kinds of foundations, systems change foundations, nuts and bolts, direct service foundations, capacity building foundations. That's, we mentioned consultants, but I think capacity builders all across the board. So there's statewide associations of nonprofits. There's nonprofit resource centers in communities. There's those kinds of folks who are sort of like, sector-wide kind of association-wide capacity builders, where consultants are one-on-one more. But we talked about consultants. We talked about the ultimate folks who are doing the work on the ground in communities. And then we talked about big systems, like whether those are pseudo-governmental or healthcare systems. And we talked about university programs. If we are talking about making a case for support, describing the project and making a case for support, who are the most important for us to focus on as we start thinking about this?
In my mind, it would be, even though I'm not in higher ed, it would be the higher ed field, because we're training the next generation of folks to continue growing it. It's also harder to get the mindset change in the older folks. Sorry to be joking, but yeah.
I represent that remark.
I think that we have to dive into these individuals that look at community change and have deep pockets when they look at it, and not Bill Gates, but like a Melinda Gates.
Melinda Gates.
It's like they do, they're thinkers, and they do have those pockets that they could latch on to this. But I guess I'm really stuck in my traditional nonprofit CEO hat, saying, we need a case statement for each audience, and that way, once we had that, then we would be able to go and say, okay, for this audience, that works. And I would just say, I want Melinda Gates. That's my audience, and write to her. And then I want, the other one, and, locally, who do we have? Ann Lovell or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So then as we look at all of these people who will be affected by our having this library and sharing all of this information with the world, I had already written down, you guys had mentioned, and I'd never thought about different case statements. Duh. You can tell I do not do this for a living. The last grant I wrote, the only grants I've ever written were for the diaper bank. Dimitri and I retired from the diaper bank 20 years ago. And both, I think there were only 2, maybe 3 big grants that I had to write, were at the invitation of the foundations who said, here, you just have to fill out this form because we need it. So
You know what? I
Yes.
think you should talk to the Diane and Bruce Haley Foundation. So because they love systems change.
Big time.
And they've been a big funder of mine across years and different organizations. Once you have something written, they would be a really cool place to sit down and talk. Jacqueline, have you gotten money from them before?
I'm even one of their recommended consultants to
Okay,
hand
so
out to
yeah.
nonprofits who don't have somebody to work with to
Yeah.
write grants. So yeah, I'm very close with the program folks over there.
Yeah, so I think
the
that one,
foundation,
and then
so yeah.
Helios as well, because that is education focused. And if we're going to start, oh, go ahead, John.
No, keep when you finish. So
Well-
I was just thinking about, public television. When I look at public television content, I would think we should just look at where it says this is sponsored by, and we should just write down all of those names. Because
Yeah,
those
for sure.
are the idea people. I think what
Mm.
we want to go after our market is who funds new ways of thinking. And so whenever I get kind of fatigued, I turn on public television and watch for a couple of days, and I get re-inspired because something new will come across. So the people who fund them would see this as that thing, one of those things that they'd be very interested in.
Very cool. Yeah.
Wonderful idea.
I agree. I've never thought of that, John, and thought I thought of everything.
Very cool.
I
What
go to
about-
donor walls at nonprofits that I visit. I go to the donor wall and see who's on the
Oh
donor
yeah,
wall
me too.
all the
I go-
time, but I
I
never
go
think
around
about
town
it in
and
the
write them down.
yeah, but I never think about it at the end of the PBS.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, you can always tell the fundraisers in the museum. They're the ones, everybody's looking at the art, and they're the ones that are taking pictures of the donor wall.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So as we are looking at all of these individuals and groups, the ultimate recipients of, because I think that part of the argument is obviously the ultimate recipients of the benefit. It's not necessarily the university, but the students who will then go out into their organizations and then take that into consideration. The next question is going to be, what will the library make possible for them? But for right now, Sakshi, tell me what's going on.
Yeah, I was wondering, what about when we're thinking of funders, even university collaborations like an SSIR or an HBS, the Harvard Business School or Stanford Social Innovation Review, would those find a project like this interesting because it combines knowledge and just all the good stuff?
Yeah. Oh. Okay, so now you've got me thinking that every department in a university does its own fundraising. And so partnering with universities who are already doing the fundraising, there's something there. There's something juicy there. I don't know what it is yet, but there's definitely something juicy there.
They're awfully selfish with their money.
Yeah, and so it's got to be a what's in it for me,
Right.
which is the next question we're going to be asking anyway. So what's in it for them? Let's go. What will this library make possible for all of those groups? What would it make possible for folks teaching nonprofit management in a capacity building or a nonprofit management at a university? What will having this compendium of resources that anybody can use to teach anything or to consult with groups, what will having this make possible for them?
I mean, I'm affiliated with the research institution, so I'm a little biased, but like the idea of like papers, like being able to like publish papers and case studies and like evidence-based work. I was thinking about like fellowships and this idea of like being on the cutting edge, which people like to think. That's kind of where my mind first went.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's good fodder for PhD students who are looking for what to do their dissertation on. Yeah.
Also how it fits into like values and like missions. I'm thinking about like sustainability goals, like DEI goals, and those like broader initiatives that this could fall under that universities also like to acquire.
And if you have not already stated so, Madeline works at the university. Is it University of Michigan, Ann Arbor? Yeah.
Mhm.
I couldn't tell by the big M on her shirt.
I was doing some tabling today, so gotta rep the brand.
Well, I think ultimately, what this makes possible is change actually happens. One of the things, Vu and I talk about this all the time. Vu talks about this all the time. Without me, both of us are always at it. And it's actually at the core of the podcast that we're launching, is that so much of the work that we do, the massive amount of work that organizations do in the nonprofit sector, is towards reactive incremental change rather than sweeping visionary change, rather than real systems change. We use the word systems change when we're like changing a policy at a legislator rather than sweeping systems change. So I think there's the ultimate, what this makes possible is, and especially making the case to a funder, is that their dollars are going to invest in their same dollars will create more change.
I think one group that will look to us as well, and I think I got this when Madeline was talking as well, are libraries and librarians. I mean, they're always looking for resources and sources of information that they can steer all of those students to. And so somewhere in our plan, we need to be very intentional about reaching that group and really familiarizing them with what you just said, which is why this is a different methodology that people can approach.
Yeah. Brilliant. What else? What's at the core of what this makes possible for all of those individuals and groups that we listed? What does this make possible for the funders and the people that they fund? Can't hear you, Debbie.
I think it will be the ability to have meaningful conversations. That catalytic thinking in this process starts from ground zero and we build together based on the process. Thus, there aren't a lot of surprises because we've beat up all those surprises along the way. And for some people, that's hard because they just want the answer. Like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. So, but I think that that is a benefit. Yeah. So what I've noticed over the years, it is a new way of working with teams, that what if way. And it helps the team congeal and with those same questions.
Yeah.
It ignites innovation.
Ooh.
Because one of my biggest longest clients has been around for 40 years in the food bank industry and been doing the same thing for 40 years. If I only write the grants for them, so I'm not going to be instigating Catalytic thinking into their into their grants, yes, but into their programming, no, because I do not do programming. But if they did that, maybe they could make some true changes to how they food bank.
Yeah.
To make some true changes in our community.
Yeah.
I just tried it at the last nonprofit I was with, who'd been doing the same thing forever and ever. They couldn't take it. I had to quit. They just couldn't take it. So I think that that's something to look at, is that, those legacy heritage organizations, it's, I think we have to handpick the first set of people that we talk to that are open.
Yeah. Yeah. What else will this make possible? What else will having this compendium of resources in a variety of forms, it's in addition to written stuff, there'll be video classes, there'll be it's one of the reasons we're doing the podcast, is to make sure that there's conversation. The podcast is entirely around the question, what creates change? There are so many podcasts. You go for nonprofit and social change podcasts, and you'll get fundraising, and you'll get boards, and you get all the internal stuff. There is virtually nothing out there about what is it that, just the question, what creates change? If I want to learn what creates change, it's the same thing. If you go to a university and you study nonprofit management, you will never learn about what creates change.
No.
You'll learn accounting. You'll learn
grant writing.
Yeah, grant writing. Exactly. Exactly. And so, as I'm thinking about, what does this make possible for folks? Because that's what the library will be. It'll be as many different kinds of media as people need to learn. And if somebody comes up with another one that we haven't thought of, it'll be in there too.
So one of the questions, a community of practice has to develop. It's really funny because I'm concluding the first module of a nonprofit cohort, folks who want to be in business. And part of what I've already challenged them is, so do you really want to be in business, or do you want to solve the problem? And they look at me like, what do you mean? And I said, well, do you really want to be a food bank, or you just want people to be able to have food? And that's the community of practice side. So I think out of this, you have to build that community of practice. I work with coaching organizations all the time, and we've got our team coaching organization over here. We've got our executive coaching organization over here. I really think we have to build the catalytic thinking practice somewhere so that people find it. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a part of it that goes with things like, I hate the word like, get a certificate, but that there's like levels of expertise or that people would have. And I think somehow that has to also be there so that the quality of the work, levels of mastery build up in this area, because and I think this came up in our board meeting a little bit. how do we make sure that people aren't just saying catalytic thinking, but don't even know how to spell it? You know, they have to know how to do it. So I just think there are people out there ready for something to gravitate toward that's related to catalytic thinking. And how do we, I think part of this, when we talk about the value to the community, is how do we ensure that community exists so that the quality of the work is there? I feel like Carl right now.
It was interesting, John, as we were thinking through the question of, if creating the future doesn't exist, what makes catalytic thinking ubiquitous? So if we're not here, what makes it ubiquitous? And we spent the greater part of a year, Madeline was integrally involved in this, convening our community around those questions. And what the community said was necessary in order for this to be ubiquitous is people need places to learn about catalytic thinking. They need places to practice with others, which is what you're talking about. And they need places to be inspired. To be honest, the first two were not a surprise. The second one, the third one, I'm sorry, the places to be inspired. What people were saying is we get such inspiration by watching, for instance, the one that I think if I were into tattoos, I would tattoo this on my arm. They said something to the effect of, you muddle through out loud so that we can all watch, and that gives me permission to muddle through as well. Basically, the fact that we're always experimenting, that this is out loud, that this is, you know, we're streaming this. People will say, you're having a fundraising conversation and you're streaming it, you're not holding it proprietary. And we're like, yeah, take it. We're an example of that. So when we started to ask John, okay, if people need places to learn and to practice and to be inspired, and we're not here, what does that look like? And that was when it became clear that what it looks like is people can learn where they're already learning. So the resources have to be there that they can take, and they can learn it where they're already learning. And they can be with other practitioners where they're already being with others. So if I'm in a classroom, if I'm in a cohort in a nonprofit resource center, I mean, so many more, thank goodness, so much more capacity building is being done via cohort rather than one-on-one, which is okay. So infuse it into that. And again, as part of not just the library existing, but the engagement piece where we want to be able to hire, whether it's a publicist, whether it's an engager, whether it's whatever, to be able to have in the pedagogy in the library, the importance of a community of practice. And here's what we've learned about using this as a community of practice. Because again, it's been so interesting to ask the weird question, which is, okay, how does the mission get accomplished if we're not here? And, you know, again, it's an experiment. It will be great no matter what. And in some cases, it will be greater. But it's really been a mind bender to say, because it's really easy to say, oh, we need to just do more communities of practice, because that's always my, you know, and especially communities of practice, because I love being in them. And then to go, oh yeah, but what if we're not here?
Mm-hmm.
Then who leads those, and what does, you know, the other thing that's exciting about that in my mind is, how does that encourage, it's basically a mutual aid approach. You know, and so how does that encourage mutual aid approaches for other things that are more concrete than this? What does a mutual aid approach look like for dealing with homelessness issues? What is if your organization was no longer be around, what would looking at homelessness look like? I mean, it's yeah. That's my geeky fun.
In agreement.
Yeah. it's good mind play, but it's also very, very real. Get closer, Debbie. I couldn't hear. I'm sorry.
My practical mind says, this is a curriculum hub that I hear wants to be available to everyone. Yet we want mastery involved with it as well.
Maybe.
Because, okay. How, once it's out there, how will it be monetized?
Well,
okay, so it doesn't need to be monetized. So when you are when asking for, it's going to live in perpetuity.
Yep.
And nobody's going to own it.
Right. I mean, if somebody will pay for the website, that'll be $50 a year. And it'll probably be us, and we're good with that. But yeah, it's not going to be, I mean, that's the whole point, is that it won't be owned. It will be out there. And to me, there's something sort of sexy about that, to say, we're not asking for something that we're going to come back next year to say, how do we maintain it? How do we maintain it? That we're creating something that will live in perpetuity and be freely available to anybody who wants it, including all your grantees.
Except we won't be able to do a certification, as John suggested, because we won't be able to maintain that certification-ness.
Yep. And we've actually shied away from certification
I
for
agree.
a bunch
Yeah,
of reasons,
I agree.
but yeah.
We have a really awesome nonprofit that their vision is, if they make change with 20% of the population, it will make change with the rest of the population.
Yes.
And so that type of thing, like they don't want to be in business because they've made change in that small 20% so that they can ultimately go away.
Yeah, that's the whole tipping point concept. Yeah. So let's look, we've talked about what this library can make possible. The fact that more dramatic change will happen out in community, which I think is probably the biggest. For universities, we talked about the fact that there's so many different benefits, from the publishing of papers, the PhD students, the having things available for their library, for anybody else's library, and librarians love that. Focusing on a group's sustainability, DEI kinds of goals, the ability to have meaningful conversations, eliminate surprises and unintended consequences, new ways of working with teams from a more possibility focus. Something that somebody has mentioned to me several times, one of our colleagues, Anne Vermel, the fact that catalytic thinking in a time of divisiveness brings people together. And I really, really appreciated that. Is there any other things that you would say that catalytic thinking in this library will make possible for folks before we start thinking about what needs to be in place for that to happen? What will this make possible for folks?
Hi, sorry, I was not able to speak then. I added a few things in the chat so that the different cases would be helpful in applying the framework to diverse problems and not just in a non-profit context. That they will serve as a starting point and a roadmap to using the framework just to make it more accessible. And it'll hopefully make the framework more discoverable. So like with the libraries, right? If the resource is there out there in the world to access, then more people are hopefully looking at it as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for pointing us to that, Sakshi. And Dimitri, I'm assuming that there's nobody in.
I've been checking.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Other thing that I'm thinking about that is so refreshing about catalytic thinking is that like things end in like a good way because we've either like solved them or we've planned for them to end, kind of like you're talking about this 10-year mission. But we don't have to keep doing the same thing over and over again, like John was saying. And there's just something really refreshing about that compared to a lot of other models of perpetuity.
Yeah. Yep. So which of these are we the most excited about? As you think about all that we've talked about, creating more change, more opportunity for people to learn rather than have to unlearn. You know, that to me is a big one. Jackie, you mentioned that people are learning in universities so that they don't have to unlearn what they learned in university. Which of these is the most exciting? To me, the most exciting is that that things will actually change. But I'm also not sure what of these ultimate results is do you think is the most exciting to foundations? One of the things that I've been noticing and this conversation is making me think about, because I don't generally think through the lens of foundations. They've been, those especially who've been supporting capacity building, have been supporting capacity building for a long time, and I'm not sure what results they're seeing from that.
I was going to mention that to you because, you know, that's what the Level Foundation did. They've supported capacity building for a long time. The End of Life Care Coalition and all that work disappeared. Mm-hmm. So I think that I think that this would be a beautiful case statement for those funders who want to look at community change and they put money into it, but they don't have that framework or foundation that everybody gets on the same page. I mean, I think that's why Vitalist is, you know, closer than anyone else to that way of work. But I think like the Haley Foundation, I think they would be incredibly interested, Helios, into, you know, all these folks who've thrown a lot of money at things, but aren't seeing results. Yeah. That leads me to a question, though. We're going to put it out there, and you're going to put it out, this free resource in perpetuity. And earlier we talked about the data. So how's that going to work? Like, if you need, like, we're not giving funders a project that we're going to report back on this data, right?
We could, I mean, because basically if what we're doing, so you're making me think about it. If what we're doing is documenting all of the demonstration projects that we've done and the results, providing that to the foundations is basically 20, 30 different case studies of what has worked. So sort of, you know, getting back to Jackie's comment about evaluation, this could be around evaluating impact or whatever words we want to use for it. But it could be basically documenting the impact of 20 different experiments with the same thought framework. I don't know if I'm being clear in that, but it's you got me thinking about stuff, so my brain's not articulating it very well.
Yeah, and I have, so it's giving me a lot of questions too, so that's probably not helpful.
Well, I mean, it might be the questions are what we need. Yeah, you know, this is part of the whole thing of, if we were a food bank, it's real easy to come up with a case for support.
You'd be surprised, actually, because the foundations are looking for They're looking for social change, and we are a transactional situation. I give you a box of food. I don't know what's going to happen later on. They want to see change, even if it's incremental change in a human's life. I'm giving you a box of food so you're not hungry tomorrow. Okay, that's all I'm doing. And to show the long-term change for a person, and that's what the foundations are wanting, is harder for those transactional nonprofits, unfortunately.
But Jacqueline, would this give them a way to document that?
That's a good question.
Well, yes, and the next question I was going to ask, as we're looking at, okay, the biggest thing is the fact that more dramatic change would happen from the dollars that a foundation is investing in however they're doing it. What needs to be in place for that? What are the conditions that will lead to the library creating more change? So people need to, what do people need to know? They need to know what the questions are. They need to know how the framework works, et cetera. What do they need to understand? What do they need to be assured of? What we've found in documenting change is that that's where the evaluation piece, the measurement piece, the whatever a piece is, that you can't document somebody's life will be healthy. But what we can document is, okay, tell me what healthy looks like. Oh, okay. If they were healthy, what would need to be in place for them to be healthy? They'd need to have nutritious meals 3 times a day. They'd need to be doing I'm just making shit up. Okay. If those are the things that need to be in place, we can document those things. We can't document everybody's healthy and life is equitable. But we can break down what are the conditions that would lead to equitable. What are the conditions? What would people need to have in order for to be living in a society that is equitable? They would need to have equal access to X and Y and Z. They would need to have education. They would, again, I'm just making stuff up. Those things they would need to have, we could say, oh yeah, those are indicators. Those are the conditions. Those are in place. Because the conundrum that we're under in the nonprofit world is that we are constantly being encouraged to metricize things that can't be metricized. So we're constantly being, our goal is a compassionate society. I can't tell you what number that is. And so you can't quantify the things we really want. And so the only things that we can quantify are the path to get there. And we can quantify those. Does that make sense? Yeah. We lost Jackie. I hope she comes back. So in order for, if the most important thing that we can say that this library and these resource documents and this final product will make possible, and this is the phase that leads into that. This is the groundwork phase that leads into that. If the thing it'll make possible is more systemic change and documentable change, what needs to be in place for that? What do people need to have in order to create that change? What do they need to, what are the people who are on the ground, the people who will be impacted, what do they need to have? What do they need to know? They obviously need to know what does and doesn't create change. Let's sort of start with that. What else do they need to know? What do they need to have? What do they need to be assured of in order to step into feeling comfortable enough to step into creating that kind of change?
I'm feeling a little cynical today, which I don't really like. So you can help me come out of it if you want. But like when we're thinking about like big organizations and universities and institutions, I mean, I think we can all relate to like there's a verbal commitment to change, but we don't actually want that much change because we're so enmeshed in the ways of being. And so I'm not sure what that looks like, right? But there's like this reassurance or like change management or like there's like some like coaching around like that there's another way and it's gonna be okay sort of thing. Because it's really scary to step into something new, especially when we have institutions that have spent hundreds of years enmeshing themselves in the ways we have been doing things. So I'm not really sure where that leads me, but that is where my brain first went.
Yeah, I'm
For them. Like when you think about what will they need, they'll need that reason, that personal, like we say commitment, but, I think today more than ever, people want to know, well, what's my end game here? How does this make me? What is it? What's my benefit?
what's
And
in
so if we're giving them this toolkit, I mean, that's what they're getting is a toolkit in a new way of thinking and a different kind of value system. But I think they need to see themselves in the work.
As you're talking, Madeline, about large organizations are always the last to change. In the olden days when the term disruptive innovation first came up 20, 30-ish years ago, they used to talk about the fact that the analogy of a battle cruiser versus a little speedboat. A little speedboat can turn on a dime, and the battle cruiser is 30 miles out to sea before they can even think about that shift. And so I'm wondering that large organizations probably need to see examples in their peer group. So there's that one early inventor or innovator, early adopter in that group that will have seen, wow, this worked for a whole lot of small organizations. I'll bet this could work in our division within, so it could be a department in a university or a division in a very large, I'm thinking about Feeding America, these huge organizations that have so many different parts. It may need to be in a division of a huge organization that they say, oh, what are they doing over there? That looks cool.
Yeah, it's the evidence-based catch-22, right? Where people only want to do things that are evidence-based, but you can never then do something new because it has, yeah, so.
Yeah. What else? What needs to be in place for that kind of sweeping change that we know is possible for folks to be using these questions to create change? Because this is really what we're selling. What do they need to have?
I guess I don't understand the question. I'm trying to think of what does this mean?
Okay.
What do they need to have?
Then let me switch it around and then we'll switch it back. If what this library can make possible for the people who will benefit from it, if what it makes possible is that they'll actually be able to create the change that we've all sensed is possible, what could stand in the way of that?
Institutions.
What else? That's the way we've always done it.
Yeah, close-mindedness, habit and history.
Habit.
Habit and history. Oh, we've tried it before. Oh, we tried that, didn't work.
Okay, so if habit and history, I love that. I am taking that phrase. If habit and history, and we've tried that before and nothing will ever work. If that is what bad looks like, what would good look like? What shifts habit and history? What needs to be in place to shift habit and history?
You know, I'm gonna risk being in trouble again, but I really think this comes to some of the generational issue. We really have to target, I think, younger folks who, you said earlier, I don't have to unlearn so much. And I really think that if we're going to really try to do this, we really have to give people, and maybe not just young in age, but maybe also newer organizations that haven't gotten into the bad habits of this is the way we've always done it, because it's, it is hard to move that institutional thing. And yet young people are very disaffected with it right now. They really are like throwing stones back and saying, no, I don't want to do what you did. I mean, look at where you are. I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a generational aspect to it, or a newcomer aspect to it that we might be able to take advantage of.
Yes.
And I think I was trying to put on my funder hat, because I used to work for a funding organization, and I don't say that with a whole lot of anyway. So, but my thinking was, the new thing. What's the
Mhm.
the new sexy jazzy thing that and if we do it in a way, I mean, if we do it in the right way, it catches fire.
Yeah, and what you're helping me to put words to is some of the questions, and I saw that Madeline needed to leave, which I'm sorry for. In terms of what do those large organizations need to see, what do they need to experience? Proof.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we're offering.
Yeah.
Is that's what the library will have versus what catalytic thinking does. The library will have proof that catalytic thinking is effective in creating change.
So
Forward, come forward, come forward.
so that makes a lot more sense to me, as a way to get it funded, is that here is the proof. Here's the philosophy, here's the framework, and here's the proof. And this is the resource library that can live in perpetuity.
Yeah.
So it's that simple. And once it's there in the on the cloud or wherever, people will be able to access it, which will change this way of thinking.
There we go. And what we're looking for the funding for is to actually create the documentation of the proof. We have the proof, but it's all in people's heads.
Yeah.
We
So
want to document.
phase one was collecting. We have this great collective wisdom in results of varied experiments from across diverse fields. What we want to do now is put that together and get it out there so others can do their own experiments.
Mm, mm, mm.
Mhm.
I love this. It feels right. What else? What else could stand in the way? I'm going to just keep going to the negative and reframing it into the positive. What else could stand in the way of creating this kind of change? Of what stands in the way of doing things in a more effective way?
Ego.
Mm, mm, mm.
I was just gonna say the status quo. Like the status quo. So with you on that, Debbie.
Have to be right, and it's got to be my way, and I'm the boss. And you know, if I didn't think of it, or if you can't give me a place to come in to make it my idea, we're not going to do it. And I
Okay.
think
So reframing that, what needs to be in place is that folks need to see that this is a, it is something they can make their own. So it appeals to ego rather than trying to get past ego. Because you can. I mean, you're basically just asking a bunch of questions. Ask these questions and see what you create.
You know, we talk about our experiments. I mean, you know, the thing with experiments is there's a certain amount of risk, right? That, you know, the experiment might not work. And I think it's important for people to recognize that that's not a bad thing. That the learning through experimentation is really the journey that we're trying to get people on to. I think a lot of times people are looking for not the journey, but the answer, right? So this is how we do it. Instead of we're going to find out how to do it, we're going to use this tool as a way to advance on the journey. And then once we get there, we're going to recognize that we learned a lot. And now we can go to another level of this. And I think, you know, that's what I see a lot of. It's, I want to do what the thing is, not see what happens, you know, not get out there and what you did for 8 years, 9 years now almost has been, we have a methodology, and when we apply it, we are patient with it. And I think that's the other thing that's going to be very difficult, which is people tend to want it yesterday or the day before. So how you are able to frame the time frame of what we have to do is important, because funders, that to me, that's where funders, you know, they're trying to look good now. And they want something that is proven. That's why we have the evidence-based thing that Madeline was talking about.
Yeah.
And part of what I have always said is, but those people, whoever our evidence is based on, somebody had to do the first one.
Yeah.
So we need to recognize our opportunities to be the first one.
Here's what you're bringing into my brain, John. I'm so glad you're here. That the evidence that we're going to be documenting, the proof that we're going to be documenting, is the results that the early adopters have gotten.
Yes.
So you don't have to be the early adopter. We're going to show you the evidence of what all those early adopters came up with so that you can be on the flatter curve of the bell curve.
But that you don't have this fixed answer.
You
know,
right.
And I think so there's a re-education piece that has to go with this.
Yeah.
I think I'm saying.
Yep.
you really have to help people. I mean, we say it at our level, but I'm also saying when you're trying to sell it to the funder, you're going to have to re-educate them a little bit as part of that sale, that I need you to, take off the old cap and put on a new one. And I think that's going to be the challenge because, but the good news is they're a little competitive. So if you say, well, you know what, maybe I'll go over there to the other guy at the ABC Foundation because I think they're a little more forward thinking than you.
Ooh, ooh.
Just, so the language is very important.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I'm smiling at the thought that yes, we want the answer to be fast and easily copyable. And my snide aside that I never say out loud, but I think is, and how's that working for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm looking at time. Keep going, Debbie.
The beauty of the frame is that it can
Say it again. You were breaking up.
I said the beauty of the framework is that it can be applied and it can be tested and it can be dismissed and applied and tested and dismissed again. So you do get incremental results. It's not like, oh, we're just going to do this and if it works, it works. But there are benchmarks along the way. And I think that that's what funders want.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. As we are wrapping up, and I wish that Jackie and Madeline could still be with us. I would love to know what is standing out to you all from the conversation. What does it feel like? What does it feel like the message is, the case is? Who are the people that, what is occurring, just overall, what is occurring to you as we wrap up here?
I can go. So what's occurring to me is that we have 10 years of experiments, research, and documentation on a new way of thinking that has affected change in a diverse group of organizations. And we want to memorialize that in a library that is available to everyone. And so what I'm asking you, Mr. Funder, to do is to give us this ability to impact all the organizations that you've worked with and you will work with in the future by giving them this foundational way of thinking. That's my synopsis.
Sakshi, how about you? What is occurring to you? You've been driving along there.
I think it's so, and I was, having a chat with my partner as well while we were driving and talking about this. And his question was, but why is it so different? Like this seems like, something, it seems like just another way of consulting almost. So what is so special about this? And I think that the fact that even if, I mean, what Debbie, what you were saying, that you can do the system, you can try it and you can retry it. I think the fact that it is so versatile and it is still so simple to understand or simple to implement as well. I think that really stands out for me as something that, I don't see why funders would not be excited about this. So that simplicity in just understanding the concept, that's something that stood out.
Yeah, I never think about the fact that it is very simple. It's just a bunch of questions. Yeah. How about you, John?
For me, I was thinking, I've done development programs for leadership for men, for example. And when we proposed a different kind of a program, there was a lot of pushback from the top saying, well, this looks elite. this looks like you're, trying to make it very elite. I was trying to do the opposite. But what I learned from that but that actually made it very attractive. And so, sometimes recognize I have a different tool in my toolkit that it's shiny, it's new, and it actually is versatile and does a lot of things. I think really helping to sell the benefit of this framework, as this would be a great opportunity for you, Mr. Funder, to pick the top 10 people you fund and, put this in place for them, work. So I think that people, are attracted to this idea this is an elite thing. And in its own way, it is. And so I think not everybody, has an appreciation for that. So I just think that looking at I hate to say it, the angle from which we need to approach the funders, but I do think that that's really the key to being successful in getting the funding.
Yeah. 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 And I wish I could say that what I'm taking out of this is one small thing, but I am taking out of this 4 pages of notes, and everything I wrote down has like an exclamation point next to it. So just having all of this wisdom in one room has just been really, really, really helpful, and homing it down into it. It always feels so big and amorphous to me because I'm in it.
That's what I think is the benefit of this collective looking at it in this way, Hildy, is that we're seeing the simplicity of it. And we're seeing like A, B, C, D. Whereas when you think of each little aspect of it, it's that ripple. So every question you ask, there's a ripple, here's a ripple. But at this stage, you have to drill down to the core, get that on paper, so then you can go out and show all the ripples.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for, like, I am going to be picking all of your brains again. I know that. And I'm just grateful that you all are on board and are part of this. And Sakshi and I are going to be working together on this really diligently, which I'm excited about. And I'm just grateful.
Well, I think we have some really good prospects out there.
Excited now.
MacArthur, Hallie, Helios,
As you all come across them, please let us know. And Sakshi and I are going to be looking. Thank you
everyone.
so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week. I'm really grateful for you guys.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.